deine Kamera stoppen?
So, welcome to this session, when to use what monitoring service here at Global Azure Austria. So welcome, my name is Toni Pohl. I'm an IT consultant located in Vienna in Austria, and I'm also an MVP for Azure. And I want to show you some services you can use in your daily life for working with Microsoft Azure. So the beginning is just, why do we use monitoring? We all know that Azure is huge, starting from, well, Azure is old, something like it started 2005, 2006, and I started from the beginning with the very first cloud services. So since that time, I have created a lot of resources in Azure. I have created a lot of subscriptions in Azure, and some of them are productive, a lot of them are playgrounds. So the idea is that monitoring really helps you to identify the resources you're using in Azure. So like the usage or the cost of a resource or the performance. And of course, security is also a very important topic. So monitoring really helps us to identify any issues we have with our Azure services, and it helps us to control, to monitor, to alert if something bad happens. For example, one of the things that happened in the very recent days or weeks was the Hafnium exploit for Exchange servers. So this is a thing that can be at least monitored, or maybe you can take some actions based on the rules with Azure Sentinel and so on. So I'm going to cover most of the Azure services in this session to show you what you can do to provide security to your Azure resources. So the first question you might have, okay, what service do I use when? What kind of possibilities, what kind of services does Azure offer to monitor and to see, okay, I need to take an action here or there? So the first thing would be, do I have an application? Is it like a service, or is it an app service? Or do I want to monitor a group of services, like a group of virtual machines or skill sets or whatever? Or is it just security or performance or maybe costs? For example, in our environment, we look at the costs on a very granular level to see, okay, which resource does cost how much? And if possible, we try to use platform as a service to simply reduce the amount of maintenance we would need to use for specific services. So this is actually my main slide for this session. It just shows an overview of what kind of services we have in Azure, and maybe a little bit outside of Azure. There are also some tips I want to give you here. And I want to go into detail with every one of these topics, with every one of these services here. So the first one is the App Insights service. So this provides a service to monitor a single application. That could be a website, that could be a desktop app, or similar. So it's very easy to connect Azure App Insights with your application, and I have a demo for you showing you how you can do this with the standard metric events and also with the other, with custom events, for example. The next part is the App Center. So App Center is an own service, but it also allows you to monitor a single application. The benefit here, that's the former Xamarin Test Studio. You can test your, especially mobile applications, and you can also use this platform to distribute your applications as well. I also have a demo for that. Then we have a feature that's not so much known, that's a Network Watcher. This provides you to really dive into like package sniffing and all that stuff that happens between, for example, a virtual network, a virtual machine, and another endpoint like a site-to-site VPN or maybe just I want to inspect a specific connection problem I have. I also have a demo for that with a virtual machine. We will have a look at Azure Monitor. This is an overall monitoring system. This is more for multiple apps, so I can add multiple storages here or services to see, okay, an overview, how is it happening in my subscription or even in my tenant. So that's more or less the overall topic here, the overall service. The Security Center, as the name tells, is for getting information about the security of your services. It also suggests and gives you improvements, what you should do. For example, your Azure storage is outdated, it's using an old API version or similar. So that's also a very good service to have a look at to see, okay, what do we need to improve security? The Azure Advisor is also a monitor. It allows you to get information about security, but also about performance and costs, for example. So we will have a look at all of these services, and Azure Sentinel, which is on top of the Azure Log Analytics workspace, which gives you also recommendations and rules, and you can create incidents and hunt for any threats and so on. And then I've added some more services that could be interesting to monitor your Azure tenant. For example, the resource graph, where you can just ask what kind of services have I running right now. Like, for example, give me all, I've identified an IP address. And that IP address, for example, is connected to a website, but I don't know which website. So you can simply ask your Azure Resource Manager for such information, or give me a list of all my certificates, for example, and so on. Also important is cost management, and of course there's much more, and let's see how it goes, how all of these services here work. So let's start with application insights. I've just an overview of every service here with one slide here, just to make a summary here. So the basic idea is to use application insights to resource and to monitor a web application, for example. And it provides you data like usage, failures, availability, and so on. A very nice feature here is application map, where I can see details about your application. Okay, now I'm connected to an endpoint, and that endpoint then connects to a database, gets some data. How long does it take to get that data? Are there any issues, any performance issues, or are there maybe any errors happening in the back? I can also set alerts, and of course, I can also use a continuous export to say, I want to log everything that's connected to that app insights to a Azure storage, for example, if you want to keep the data for longer. So let's have a look how this looks like. And I will stop my cam here so that you see the full screen and increase this a little bit. So here I'm connected to my Azure portal here. So if I want to create a new resource, so let's go maybe to an Azure function. So here are my function apps, and maybe select not all subscriptions here to make it a little bit more visible. Just select these two, or yeah, just select this one here. And here there should be two function apps in that subscription here. And here's one that's called Monitor App Insights. So this application here, this function, is, we will see that in Visual Studio in a minute or so. I have the possibility to connect this to application insights. So currently it takes a moment to load here. So here we go. And that's just a click away. So whenever you create a resource in Azure, you have the option that is by default selected to say, I want to connect this resource here to application insights. I did it here, and can see the connection I'm using is also called Monitor App Insights. It has the same name as the application. Of course, you can connect multiple applications to a single workspace, for example. So here, let's have a look what we have in here. View the application insights data of that app insights. And in application insights, we see, okay, this is more or less what's happening right now, or what happened in the last hour, for example. I can see, are there failed requests and how is the performance going? In that case, there are no failed requests. That's nice. And we saw that application, that function has been called multiple times here, and the average response time was this here. You can see that's interactive, and this is the number of calls I've done to that function app here. So if I go to the functions, or let's go maybe have a look here at the application details. So just let me have a look here what kind of data I want to see. I have live metrics, I have failures, I have performance, so I can dive deeper into these topics here. Like, for example, okay, these are the requests that happened here. Of course, I can also use the logs here to make my own queries. And what I see here is that we have a couple of queries that allow me, that are predefined, that allow me to see, okay, give me a request count trend, for example. And what we see here is the Kusto language that says, show me all the requests that happened to that application in the last 24 hours, for example. So when I run this request here, this Kusto query, we will see some data. So it's very easy to connect your functions, your applications to an application inside storage, and you get a lot of data out of it. The nice thing here is, if I scroll to the right, you can define your own queries here. So like here, for example, if I go to Monitor App Insights, and I load that, I have multiple requests here, like request or show me the requests with a time chart. So let me run this. Currently, it takes a moment to load data here, and I will get the result depending how it's rendered, as a table or as a pie chart or time chart and so on. So currently, there seems to be an issue here. Let's see what kind of other events we have. I can go to the tables here and simply see, okay, these are the tables where I have data. So for example, I'm sending data with custom events to that log space here. So how can you do this in your own applications? Well, the first step would be go to, if you have a static website, you can simply integrate the JavaScript to say, okay, I want to have my data logged to a application insights, depending on what kind of what kind of website you are developing. So that would be just a snippet-based setup to say, okay, I just want to connect my website, if it's static websites, for example, to an application insights reported here, as we saw in the Monitor App Insights application. The only thing you need to enter here is the instrumentation key. You get that instrumentation key very easily once you have created an App Insights service. Here's the instrumentation key. You simply copy that here and paste it into the snippet and add that snippet to your HTML website. So that would be the case if you have a static website, for example, hosted somewhere else. If I have hosted it on Azure, Amazon, or on Amazon Web Services or somewhere else. That would be the easy part. The much easier is to simply connect your function or your application directly and to use it for your own logging. And I want to show you this here. So this application Monitor App Insights, let me just run this. So I go back to my application here, Monitor App Insights, go to the functions. We will see there's one function here. That's this one here. And if I go to code test and run it now, this should protocol to my application insights. So let's wait a second for it to load. Here we go. So let's run this. And what does this function here do? Well, that's an endpoint I'm just calling. And I send custom data from my application to that app analytics. You can see it's really quick. So I started it right now and it's running very, very fast. So this is the application what's currently running here. So we have a startup, and in the startup, I simply add a telemetry provider here. And the telemetry provider is this class here, so telemetry provider, which says, I want to use everything that is logged. I want to send that data to my app insights. And here again, you can see the key. That key usually would be stored in your host JSON or in your application settings. And here are some methods to say, okay, I want to track events. I want to track also other data, like, for example, dependencies or other things. How can I use this? So you can download this sample from my GitHub repository. I will show the URL later. So what does it do here? Well, it says register the provider here in the class, and then I'm simply using a member variable provider. And this is how easy I can use this. So let me start this. I have a breakpoint here just to show what it does here. That's a .NET Core 3.1 application and Azure Function. And if I start this and go to the endpoint, that's the same what happened when I called that method here from the Azure portal. I've already deployed it, as we have seen here. So now the configure, the registration is happening. Simply continue here. And now I should get the endpoint. So that's the endpoint of my application. And I simply go to my browser here and navigate to that URL here to continue with the application. Now we see we come to the telemetry client. So I simply continue here and again here. And now I start really protocolling what's happening in my application. So this is the default log information. And now I say, okay, I create a new dictionary. In that dictionary, I pass my own data, like a key value thing, like there are 3 properties which I add to that dictionary, 3 items here. And then I simply say provider track event. And now I hand over that dictionary. The same thing can happen here with metrics. And I've added the Kusto query language right here to see how can I access that data that's sent here from my application. So customer metrics, for example, would be this event here, or this data that I send to that storage here. So you can see there are different types here, like track metric, track exception, and I end here with the track event to say, okay, this was the last event that happened in here, and now I'm done. So if I now go back to my application here and go to my application insights, it might take a moment that data arrives in the application inside storage. So this can take some minutes or so. But just to give you an idea here, let's see if it works now. If I go back to my log here and I simply go open my own queries again, so my shared queries. It didn't work before instantly, but let's load it and try to see what happened here. So just go to the request. That would be a built-in request. That's connected by, or that is done by connecting the Azure function to that application insights. So let's see. Currently, it seems it takes a moment here to get the data here. But the idea here is, let me cancel that. Let's see if are some custom events. Maybe that's faster here. We should see sooner or later that the events that we have tracked here in that application, which is, for example, this dictionary with that data here, should show up here in the Azure storage. I did run it multiple times today, as we've seen in the overview before. Currently, yeah, maybe return to that a little bit later to see if we will see that custom events. You can see the tables here on the left side, and you can see all the properties that are in that table. So I can use the Kusto query very easily to ask for that data here. Just to give you a very quick overview of the Kusto language, where can you use that in the meantime? So you can use the KQL query language for application insights. You can use it for log analytics. You can also use it for other services like Windows Defender, Advanced Threat Protection, or the Azure Security Center, or also the Sentinel, for example, is using that as well. Okay, with that, let's jump to the next topic, to Azure Monitor. So Azure Monitor is for multiple, let's say, log data to get you an overview. For example, what kind of sources would you feed into an Azure Monitor? It would be something like Azure resources. It could be VM agents or log analytics storages, metrics explorers, and so on. So let's have a look at this here. Maybe return to that a little bit later to see if that returns a result in near future. So let's go to Monitor in the meantime. And here's my Azure Monitor, and here you can see the insights. So what data is available here in the Monitor? And here you can see there's a lot of data. So depending on what kind of subscriptions I select here, so simply select 3 here, for example, to reduce the data a little bit. And here you can see there are some application insights. There should be some virtual machines or not. Okay, I don't have any virtual machines here, but with that filter, oh, here's one, yeah. And I see, okay, this one, for example, is healthy, and so on. So I can go through that here just to get an overview, what kind of data, what kind of log information do I have for the various resources. And in that case, for storage accounts, once this here is loaded, for example, we see how is it going with that storage account here. So there should be maybe one, or maybe take this one, because I wanted to dive into one of the storage accounts here to see how it's going with my data, with my analysis of the resources here. And come on, show me the one or two storages that are in that subscription here. Time range the last 4 hours, and here you can see, okay, there's something happening. There is some data coming to that storage here, and of course I can go into that here and see, okay, maybe there's latency, or I can look at the storage then and see how is it going in here. And you can simply click through all of the insights here, and of course you can also set alerts here. So Azure monitoring, from my perspective, is really what this overview here shows. It allows you, or it gives you more or less one page or one summary, one overview over multiple data that's connected here in the various insights. So with that, let me just show you the other options, what we have to monitor data. Network Watcher. Network Watcher allows you to really use it's like a package sniffer. You can look into network packages when you have, for example, any issues with connections, with a VPN connection or something like this. And I have one tip here. If you're working with that, you want to troubleshoot network connections, there's a nice tool, for example, Wireshark, and there are many others out there. I just want to show you how this looks like. So I have a virtual machine here. And that, if I open the Network Watcher, and let's see what we have here. So here are various network diagnostic tools here. So for example, as I mentioned, you can troubleshoot VPN connections. That's a little bit too complicated to do it right now in this overview here, but I just want to show you the idea here by using a packet capture. So I go to add capture. I say my target virtual machine should show up here. I have it in that subscription. There's a Network Watcher test virtual machine. I give that a name like test 6, for example. I want to protocol that data that's collected here into a storage account. And let's use this one, the Network Watcher test storage account. I can define some more limits and so on. And here say, what do I want to protocol between that machine where our agent is running, collecting that data, and maybe another endpoint. So just to look up one specific address. So let's go to my company webpage. So here's an IP address like this one, for example. So I use this here and say, this is the remote IP address without spaces, and the remote port is HTTPS. So I add this as a filter. I'm interested in all TCP traffic that's coming from that machine to a specific endpoint, and then I simply save that here. So I've now added a package test 6 here. This is currently added to my Network Watcher. The machine must be running, so it has been added as we see. So I refresh this. Here's my test 6, and it's currently loading here. So it should be running in a moment or so. You can see I already tried it for multiple times here. So the agent is now ready, and now every traffic to that machine should be collected. So let me go to that machine I've already opened here. And remember, the rule I defined was every traffic going to a specific IP address. In my case, for example, it's atwork.at here. So if I navigate to that address and maybe click around here a little bit, that should be collected. So let's go back to our Network Watcher. and stop this here. Stop. I should now get a package here, and you can see the storage location of that package is this one here. So I simply download it. That's a blob storage, and here I can download it. And now I get a cap file. So if you look at my downloads here, we're here. This is the file we just created. And now let's open my tool here, and I can look into that package. So that's the idea of the Network Watcher, to really diagnose any issues you might have when connecting to a specific resource. So let's go to my downloads. And I think this was the latest one right now. And then I really see the package here and can go through all the information that's in here. So for example, what I should see, okay, this is my website. You see it here, that's the Atwork AT. And for example, I'm using that certificate here from Let's Encrypt, and now the traffic is HTTPS and so on. So that's the idea here. Let's go to the next topic, to the next overview, the Azure Security Center. The Security Center really gives you a recommendation. It collects data about your services and says, well, there's a service that should use like a website. It shouldn't use HTTP, it should use HTTPS and so on. So the Security Center is perfect for the typical scenario. You want to secure your tenant, but it's mostly for, and this is why I made the star here, for collecting and preventing. So it really collects the data, says, okay, there's something happening. For the analytics and hunting, there's Azure Sentinel, which is more or less a combination to that or an addition to that. So that is the main purpose here. So have a look, let's have a look at our Security Center. So, oh, this was the wrong security. Oops. Security. So this is actually where I wanted to go. And the Security Center allows me to see what kind of recommendations I have here for specific, in that case, subscriptions. So let's see how it goes when it's loaded. So here's an overview. And it also provides me a secure score. Maybe you know the secure score from Microsoft 365, but this is more or less my list, my overview. I have a security score, I have regulatory compliance topics, and so on. And if you look at the recommendations here that are filtered, we will see that there should be some recommendations for these subscriptions I've selected. In my case, let's find out how I can secure my services here. And in the meantime, let's have a look. In the meantime, while this is loading, I saw there's a question by Joseph. Is it possible to feed these custom events to use with PowerShell scripts, or is it best to queue things through a .NET app? To answer that quickly, custom events can be sent to whatever it is, log analytics, for example, or to an Azure Storage, or to any other system, with every method you want to use. So for example, of course, you can simply connect to the endpoint and send the data there. But if you're using a .NET application, for example, I would really recommend to use the SDK, what I also did. But it's the same for more or less every service Azure provides, and also other Microsoft services provide. Use the SDK if possible, but of course you can connect to the endpoint and authenticate in the header there as well. Okay, so in my case, recommendations here. So let's see, I have some here like enable MFA, for example. You can see this is okay here. It has a good score here, but maybe there are some other other services that should have some improvements in regarding security. So for example, Azure Defender for SQL should be enabled on a SQL server. So let's have a look at this here. We will see that I will now see that one specific recommendation for that service that is running here. So let's also see what's happening. I can remediate the vulnerabilities here once it's loaded. So you can see this is a severity high, for example, and it says, well, there's one atwork DB dev server, and that's not really secure here. So in the best case, I can simply select that resource here and inform about, okay, what can I do? Or the security center already allows me to fix this by simply selecting it and say, okay, please try to fix it here. And then the action will enable, in that case, the Azure Defender for SQL Server for that database. And then I can simply say, click, please fix it if possible. Not all of the services can be fixed automatically, which means you have to take your own action, you have to inform about the issue, and then maybe do the steps that are necessary to reduce that security risk to make it more secure. And of course, you should go here through that. You can also add alerts here and so on. So this is a really recommendation to look at the security center and see how secure are my resources here. With that, let's come to my next topic here, which is the Azure Advisor. The Azure Advisor is a similar thing, and just to show you that quickly, it allows you to check not only from a security perspective, but also from a cost perspective or performance perspective, how your resources are, how you can improve the services itself, and it's more or less the same story. So let's have a look at the Azure Advisor. I have it already here pinned to my left menu here, and here you can see the overview also about other topics. Security is also part of it, but it also has, for example, reliability or performance and so on. In my case, I'm relatively good with the rest, so I don't have any recommendations for reducing costs, for example, but I have a bunch of security issues and I have reliability issues, so I should look at that. For example, one of the reliability improvements here would be, hey, there you have a blob storage, you have an Azure storage, enable soft delete to protect your blob data. This impacts 8 resources here, so I can simply go here and see, okay, these are the resources where I simply can, or maybe I should go and enable soft delete for that storage here. So I simply go to enable soft delete protect data here. And now we should see that I can also say, I want to enable this feature here, or I want to enable this feature. And this was the recommendation here. Hey, you should enable soft delete for your blob storage and keep deleted blobs for 7 days, for example. And then I can simply say, click save and so on. So the advice is also very helpful. And one tip from my side, use the advice because it's a free service. It also sends your data. For example, it reminds you about, it gives you recommendations. So this looks like here, for example, you get a reminder, hey, your advisor recommends you to have a look at your actions. You get it via email from time to time. You can configure a lot in here just to see what can you improve to optimize your resources. Okay, the next topic is Azure Sentinel. Sentinel is more or less on top of the log analytics workspace, which allows you to, gives you rules and allows you to hunt for any threats or analytics for any security threats, for example. So this is the full, let's say, scope, the full scope of actions where you see, okay, can I prevent any issues? Oh, something happened, create an incident, work on that incident, try to find out what happened, and then respond to that incident. So it's a completely CM system. So let's go to Azure Sentinel here and check if something happened here. Okay. And I need to select another resource while I have my Azure Sentinel configured. It's here. It's called atwork Sentinel here. And it gives me an overview of my a summary of all the rules that are defined in here. And you can see what's happening here. For example, there have been 3 alerts here and other data like diagnostics. So all of that data comes from an Azure storage here. the storage can be configured, and you can see here the size of Sentinel. It comes with different flavors. So depending on the number of data you store here, there's also the pricing for that. In my case, for example, if I go to the workspace setting for that Azure Sentinel here, which is here, and I go to usage and estimated costs here, and that's interesting. Here's the costs for that workspace, for the log analytics workspace. And if I go to the data retention, so you can see the costs are very low here, although we feed a lot of data into that storage here. But the interesting part here is how long do you want to save to store that data? And you can configure that here in the data retention of that log analytics workspace. And you can see the maximum data retention is 730 days, which means Azure Sentinel can access data up to that time you define in here in that log space. By default, it's 30 days. And of course, the more storage you store, the more the price increases. So you can configure that on your own, how you want to have it in your Azure Sentinel here. Okay, so let's go back to our Sentinel. What do I see here? The first important part here are the data connectors. The data connectors allow you to feed data, let's say, from a firewall like a syslog system or any other system to Azure Sentinel to analyze it here. So the basic idea here is really to get as much data as needed into this one storage account, into this one log analytics account here, and see what you can do for to improve the security and to see what's happening in my tenant here. So the data connector here would be, for example, if I search for Cisco, for example, I see there are some data connectors. And the nice thing here is when I click on one of these data connectors, I see immediately what kind of data source do I need for that. So let me remove the filter, just maybe take another one. There should be, for example, Azure Key Vault. That's a nice one. You can see the green mark here, which means I'm connected to that, or I'm using that data connector. And it shows me how much data is in here and what kind of data types do I need here, or for AKS, for example, what kind of data do I need to get data into my storage here. So it's some data connectors are free, others do cost something. So it really depends on the connector here. And what I wanted to show you, for example, here, or maybe there's something with Exchange in here. Here, for example, there are some which I have already connected here. Let's see the description, and I can deploy it, but I'm looking for the required data that should be show up here somewhere. But you get the idea. So I can start using that connector here. I can say open the connector page, and then I connect to that service. Maybe I need to authenticate, and it says me, okay, do I have the prerequisites to get the data here for running that analysis here? So you first would select the data connectors, and then you select what kind of analytics, what kind of rules you want to use here. So for example, I've added some rules here. So at work, for example, that are already active, and this is not live data. So which means the data is collected to that log analytics workspace. Azure Sentinel is using the rules on a time schedule and say, okay, every 5 hours I run this specific. In that case, it's really 5 hours to run that rule here and see, okay, something is happening, and this is the rule query, and this is looks familiar to us because it's using Kusto language to analyze that log analytics workspace, and then applying that rule here says, okay, there are audit logs in the last 5 members, has something added to a specific group here, and that's simply a query expression. And this is running all 5 hours here, and when this happens, then I create an incident, or Azure Sentinel is creating an incident here and saying, well, something happened based on that rule here, you need to take action. So for example, this was the incident that has been fired here. So I can go to the full details here. And now I have the CM system where I can respond to that specific incident here. So we will see that when it's opening, that I can now configure, okay, who is responsible, for example, for this event here, what is the status of it, what happened, and really dive into the incident and see, okay, this happened in that case. It was somebody has been added to that group here, and I say that's a very specific group with high risk or something like this. I want to know what's happening here. So depending on the service and on the incident, you can find a lot of information about this specific action that happened. Okay, so with that, I want to show you another topic here, what you can use after that, which is the Microsoft App Center. The App Center is very similar to Application Insights. It allows you to integrate, to test, and even to distribute your applications, and it works with the same principle. So it's optimal for all kinds of applications, especially for mobile applications, and it allows you to find, for example, bugs on any device before you release your application, or to test your application with 1,000 iOS devices. This would be the formerly Xamarin Test Cloud, which is now in the App Center. So these are some things you can use in here, and let me show you that. So go to my Visual Studio App Center here, and you can see this is not integrated in the Azure portal. That's an extra system, appcenter.ms. You can register here with a GitHub account, and you can simply create a new application here and say, okay, this is my test app 2, for example. This is the platform I'm using here. That's an alpha, and this is, let's say, a Windows application or an Android or Mac application and so on. And this is developed in Cordova, for example. And then you create such a new app, and then you get the steps how you can integrate App Center into your applications. I already did it here with a simple test with a legacy application, with a Windows application. In my case, it was a Windows form, and this is exactly what I'm using here. So I've done this here. I've added the App Center libraries, the SDKs. I added them with NuGet, and this is more or less my key here. I want to start protocolling. And this is a very simple form application, which is this one here. It does the following. It says, give me an address, and I read the content and show it here. So let me run this here. And it's connected with App Center with that mechanism here. So here's the application, https global-azure.net. And I simply click get the data here, and I create a new client. You can see it's really just some lines of code. And I simply say, give me that data here, and show it in the text box, and that's it, and show me the number of bytes. So this would be the website of global-azure.net, and it worked perfectly. And I have protocoled that to my application center with that idea here. So if I do something like this here, I say that's an invalid address, and I simply say get again here. I do the same thing. I should now produce an error, an exception here, and I simply can use the crashes track error method here and provide the full error object here. And now I simply also say, okay, what was the message here? So I see, okay, that given path format is not supported here. Something did not work here correctly, and this is protocol. So if I look now in my App Center, which is here, and I go to my diagnostics and to issues, you can see that I already created some of these issues here. And I can dive into that, like web request create, for example, and say, okay, this was really what happened here, and there was an issue with that operation here. So that's a really nice feature, and you can see it's very similar to App Insights. It's just more the focus more on, let's say, mobile apps or other apps, other types of apps, where I see a similar information here, like I would see on App Insights. Of course, you can go to the settings. You can also, for example, configure webhooks and so on. to see, okay, how is it going with that app, what's happening here. The interesting part here, what I want to point out, you can also distribute the application here. So for example, you can create various releases. So if I go to my Windows app form here, I go to the properties and go to my assembly information. I increase the assembly information, publish this new version here. I can then upload it to my App Center. I simply put a zip into the App Center here for that application. And then I see, okay, the number of downloads, and people are able to download it from here. And I also would see the statistics, who is using that application, and so on. So just to give you an idea of that, how this looks like, this is more or less the application. How is it going? If I see I want to install it, I want to distribute it for specific people, I would send out, App Center would send out a mail, and then I get redirected to my Windows application. I can download it, and so on. Good. So App Center is also a very nice thing. Just to mention one thing here, App Center, it's not free. You have to provide a credit card for that. I think it's free for a month or so. So the focus, the target audience is a little bit different than App Insights. App Insights also is free up to a specific storage account, but depending on the number of data you pay for that service here. Okay, so with that, let's come to an end here to my resource graph. Resource graph is also important from a monitoring perspective, from my opinion, because it helps you to answer current questions. So, for example, what I said at the beginning, I want to get information about what is the where's the website hosted with that IP address, or show me a list of all the certificates that are running, that are expiring in, let's say, 30 days or so. I've added some of these queries here at my dashboard. So if I go down here, certificates expiration here, I could go to my resource query, to my resource, how's it called? Resource Graph Explorer. That's it, what I was looking for. And I can run queries, and the queries also work with the Kusto language. So this is, for example, one of the things that I did prepare here to say, okay, give me a list of all the resources, and you can simply dive into the tables here and say, okay, I'm running a Kubernetes store, something like this, or I'm running other resources, and I want to get the current data of that, and say, okay, show me all the certificates that are expired at least 30 days ago. And then you should get a result of that. Let's run it. Come on, show me a result, please. It doesn't currently. There are predefined queries as well. Yeah. So currently it doesn't work properly, but we should get a list here sooner or later. But again, you get the idea here. So for example, let's see if another query works. Say I want to get all the resources that are websites in West Europe. And if I go to results, it doesn't give me any results here, but you get the idea of what you can ask here to get the current status. In that case, it's not really a storage, but we are doing a live query against the Azure Resource Manager, which is also very useful for specific things here. So my last 2 points, because I'm almost at the end here, cost management is also important to get you the information, what do resources cost, and for that here, simply go to cost management and billing, and go to, let's say, to my account here, and to my subscriptions, and here to cost management maybe. And here I can set cost alerts, which is also useful to say, I want to get an alert every time my cost is reaching 80% of a specific limit, which I set. So I give that a name here, limit, reset period, budget amount is 100 euros, for example. And then I see, okay, how is it going with that subscription here, with that account, and simply continue. And then you can see, I can say my forecast is 80%, then please send an alert to that email address. So just to mention this, because not many people are aware of that, and this really helps for getting an overview here. My last point here is to inform about, of course, you can define your own solutions. For example, you can use the security graph to see all the sign-ins that are happening. You can use the Azure accounts, you can use the endpoints. So you can more or less develop your own solution to monitor specific things or to react on specific things that are happening in the Azure portal. So this is my main information I want to give you here, when to use what service. I tried to make an overview over the various Azure services, starting with App Insights to cost management. And I have provided a green point, which is a recommendation. If you want to monitor an app, use Application Insights. If you want to investigate security issues, use Azure Sentinel. But you could also use Security Center, depending on the purpose, how deep you want to dive into that incident, or if you just want to get information. Well, there's a service that should be secured. So this is more or less the main output of this session. I hope this gives you an overview when to use what. And with that, I say thank you. You can find the samples I used on my GitHub repository. And just to also point out, this is part Global Azure Austria 2021 is part of a virtual Global Azure.net. And there's also a cool challenge, Global Azure AT Battleship. Check that out. And many thanks for your attention. I hope it was useful. It gave you a lot of, well, at least overview over the various services. And with that, many thanks and have a wonderful rest of the conference. So thank you.